What is happening? Welcome in, everybody. We're live. Here to break down week 2 of the college football slate. It's a beautiful day. There's college football on every week. Not as many midweek games, so we're all patiently waiting until Saturday, probably impatiently waiting, are most of us. But we have a loaded schedule here on the slate. We're going to break down each and every game. If you're new here, we're going to talk about the relevant fantasy players, discuss the over-unders, the win total, or the totals, and what we're looking at, who some players are that you should target, and breaking down every single relevant player. So first, co-host Kevin, how you doing this evening? Muted.
Hear me now?
You still with me, Kevin?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay. How we doing?
Good, man. We're ready for some action. I really like this. I actually like this slate better than week 1. So let's hope we hit something.
Let's hope so, indeed. All right, so let's get straight into it. Straight into it.
Yep.
First game on the slate: South Carolina versus Arkansas. South Carolina is an 8.5-point dog. A little interesting in this one. The Arkansas defense, very good defense, but they are banged up. Jalen Catalon, their star safety, not expected to play in this one. Last I checked, but that was not official, so he still might play. Big news, he's their star player. Other than that, South Carolina, I thought their offensive line kind of looked pretty crappy in week 1. They did play Georgia State and win somewhat comfortably, but they did block 2 punts in that game, so I think it was a bit misleading. You have Spencer Rattler in at quarterback. You have a wealth of receiving options. Are you buying in on South Carolina in this matchup, Kevin?
Not a ton. The only real exposure I might have is Jaheim Bell, their tight end that they kind of use as a Debo Samuel-esque guy. He's 3,500. At that price, he seems like a pretty good play. I think he had 7 carries last week, so they use him, like I said, in both ways. So if I have any exposure, it'd probably be there. But other than that, not a lot of Gamecocks in my rosters.
Yeah, I think you could target them here and there. Spencer Rattler's super cheap. He's 5.9K. So if you're looking at a cheap quarterback, I guess I don't hate it. It's not really supposed to be a very high scoring game. It's only 53 is the total. So I wouldn't be super interested. He does have some cheap pass catching options. Josh Fan was the top guy a year ago. And then you get Antoine Wells, the transfer from James Madison, before they went to the FCS ranks. He did have 7 catches a year ago. Overall, I just think they're fine. I think you have some options here. I wouldn't really attack the running game against Arkansas, but Marshawn Lloyd looks like he's due for a big year. He's a former 5-star who looks like he's finally kind of getting the lead back role. I think if you are in the need of a cheap punt, their tight end, Jaheim Bell, I think you could do worse. He has a questionable tag, but everything I saw sounds like he's going to play, so stay tuned on that. But he only had 4 receptions a week ago, but they really want to get him the ball. They keep calling him Debo Samuel and whatnot. They actually gave him 7 rushing attempts last week, so I think he's going to be very involved in the offense. Had a few explosive touchdowns in the bowl game against South Carolina, so I would potentially be interested there. All right, looking at Arkansas, they're priced pretty far up. You have Rocket Sanders, the running back, at 7.9K. KJ Jefferson at 7.4K, the dual threat running back. And then you have some receivers, Hazelwood at 6.5, Warren Thompson at 5K, and some unappealing receiving options, I would say, in general. But you do have Trey Knox, the tight end, who had 2 touchdowns a week ago, is priced all the way down at 4.1K. Any interest in Arkansas here, Kevin?
Yeah, as you said, probably my only interest, again, is a cheap option in Trey Knox, the tight end, for 4.1K. I think he had 75 and 2 scores last week. Could be a decent cheap option. Should be pretty low owned. KJ Jefferson is just too expensive, and so is Miles Sanders for the matchup. This one could be a 24-21 game, 24-17. I'm just not expecting a ton of fantasy goodness in this one.
Yeah, there's not a reason to target this one. The guys just aren't really cheap enough. I will say Rocket Sanders did have 4 targets a week ago, so it seems like he's going to be pretty heavily involved in the offense while they keep working Johnson back from injury. Knox had 7 targets a week ago, led the team. Hazelwood had 5, and Landers had 4. So I think Landers is going to be their deep threat, and he's priced all the way down at 3.9K. So if anything, a cheap option, but I just think they're a little too expensive in this matchup for me. All right, next up, we have Missouri versus Kansas State. Line in this one, and I pulled these lines this morning, so if there's a slight fluctuation, whatever. K-State is favored by 7.5. Over-under is 57. Some game notes on this one. It's actually the first time that Missouri has faced a Big 12 team since they met West Virginia back in 2019. Overall, you have their quarterback priced all the way down at 5.8K, Brady Cook. You have Luther Burden, the star wide receiver, at 5.9K. Are your main guys you're looking at here. And then the running back room, we saw a three-way split last week between Elijah Young, 6.6K, Nathaniel Pete, 5.9K. And then where is he? Schrader, priced down at 4.2K, the transfer. What are you looking at here for Missouri, Kevin?
Possibly some Burden. The freshman looked good. I think he had 3 rushes, 3 receptions. 5,900 is a little pricey for me, though. As I said last week, I don't like playing guys against Kansas State. They muck it up and they just kind of turn it into a not so good fantasy experience. So I generally don't play many guys against Kansas State.
Yeah, I think I pretty much agree. I think Luther Burden, this kid's a star. They gave him a bunch of rushing attempts last week. I would just never hate playing Luther Burden, but this is an offense where they generally spread the ball around and playing a good Kansas State defense that mucks it up. So I think mostly I agree with you. Nathaniel Pete, the running back. So last week they said he had a soft tissue injury. I think he's the most talented running back. I think he's the best running back. I think he has the most explosiveness. I think he has the most receiving chops. He's a Stanford transfer. And basically I like Stanford transfers because they have a lot of talented kids and they just totally misuse them. So I'm generally a fan of targeting Stanford transfers. You don't see it too often. But Drinkowitz said he is going to use 3 running backs until one of them shows they can handle the workload. So I don't really know if that's going to change in week 2. That's what he said before week 1. So that scares me off. I don't think you have to go to Pete, but he does have slate breaking upside. This is an offense last year that gave Tyler Beatty just a million carries. He led the team in rushing and receiving. So something to keep in mind there. As far as the wide receivers go, they just rotate their guys. Bannister and Levet both split snaps. So Levet had a nice game at 4.8K, but he's not really a full-time guy. I would assume he wasn't in week 1, even though he did lead the team with 8 targets. And then Luther Burden was second with 7. All right, Kansas State. You have Adrian Martinez, the transfer from Nebraska, in at quarterback. You have Deuce Vaughn, one of the best running backs in college football. And then you have a bunch of wide receivers nobody's going to play. What are you thinking here for Kansas State, Kevin?
So just on principle, I don't know that I can ever play Adrian Martinez. However, he does have some upside here. It could be a game where he goes for 102 or 3 scores on the ground, or he could do nothing. So it's really a boom or bust play. If you're a little risk averse, throw him in there. Obviously, the best play on K-State is Deuce Vaughn. Guy's an animal, great receiver. He's their focal point of their offense. So I'm going to have a ton of exposure to Deuce Vaughn. I think he's 7.6K. Isn't too expensive. I'm all in on Deuce Vaughn. The only caveat is if Martinez goes for those 2 or 3 touchdowns, Deuce Vaughn's touchdowns could be limited. Maybe he only gets 1, but I think he's more in the line of 2 or 3 total touchdowns.
Yeah, I don't hate it at all. I'll never hate on Deuce Vaughn. Absolutely. I think there's some other running backs on the slate we'll talk about. He's not a must play, but this kid has receiving upside. I think one thing to watch is whether or not Adrian Martinez is going to eat into his rushing workload, because Adrian Martinez is a rush first quarterback. I think that's a concern. I would say it's a little mitigated for me. They have a new offensive coordinator, Colin Klein. He was the quarterback there. It doesn't seem like all that long ago. He was a Heisman finalist, and he said he's going to push the tempo. We didn't really see that week 1. They didn't look good, but in the bowl game, they dropped 1 million points on a depleted LSU team. So I think in general, that would mitigate the uptick in tempo, would probably mitigate the concerns about Martinez stealing the rushing workload. So yeah, Deuce Vaughn's fine. Adrian Martinez at 6.7. That's just not a bad price. It's not a great price. I think it's a correct price. He looked terrible in week 1. He had 15 pass attempts and only went for 53 yards. But this guy's primarily a rusher. They were playing a cupcake matchup. He's just always one of those guys that has like 3 rushing touchdown upside. So he's always a guy I'm going to have to mention. Missouri's rush defense was absolutely terrible. They were like the worst in the country to start the beginning of last season. I loved playing against them. But they actually were pretty good by the end of the year. And I think they're okay there. I mean, they're an SEC school. They figured it out a little bit. So I don't think they're absolutely god awful like they were at the beginning of last season. Those stats are a little skewed. All right, next up, we have Wake versus Vandy. Wake minus 12.5. The line shot all the way up from around 6 at open to around 12.5 when the news came out that Sam Hartman is returning at quarterback. Their star quarterback, he's been in college for years and years and years, was starting all the way back in 2018 as a freshman. So he's playing. He had an undisclosed medical issue that they said was going to keep him out for an indefinite period of time. Turns out that indefinite period of time was only 1 week of playing time. They later disclosed that he was dealing with a blood clot issue, and it sounds like he is all good to go. Over under in this one is 65.5. So Wake is anticipated to be one of the top options on the slate. Where are you looking here at Wake, Kevin?
Pretty much quarterback, wide receiver. So with Hartman back, 8K, pretty good price. He may be a little rusty. However, he is still playing Vandy, so he's got 4 or 5 total touchdown upside. Last year, I think he had like 12 rushing touchdowns, so he's sneaky on the ground, can easily pop a score or 2 in on the ground. With Hartman back, I really don't want any other running backs. But I do obviously love A.T. Perry at 6.9. He's usually an 8,000 receiver. Hartman back, we didn't do much week 1, but Hartman back, he should have a really, really good game. So a Hartman Perry stack, I'm down with that for sure. No, can't hear you.
Oops, muted.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I don't really see why you'd be against that. Donovan Green had 8 targets in week 1. A.T. Perry had 5. I don't know if I'd read too much into that. A.T. Perry is going to be one of the top receivers in college football, and he's priced below 7,000. This guy's due for a monster year. He was taken in the first round of CFF draft. So it'd be like if Justin Jefferson was priced below 7K this week. You can imagine what would happen there in NFL DFS. So certainly like him. I would never hate anybody playing Donovan Green in tournaments, even though the price difference is not as much as it should be between him and A.T. Perry. In the slot, Taylor Morin is going to split time with Keyshawn Williams. So that's a little hard for me to love either one of those guys. Taylor Morin saw 19 snaps, whereas Keyshawn saw 14 in the first game. So I would anticipate they're listed as an or on the depth chart. So I'd anticipate that continues. But overall, Wake always has slate breaking upside. I think A.T. Perry is my favorite play. The quarterbacks we'll talk about later in the slate. There's a lot of really cheap ones, so you really don't have to pay up at quarterback. And there's some other really good options at paying up as well. But Sam Hartman's one of those. If you're making multiple lineups, Sam Hartman absolutely has to be in some of them for tournaments and for cash as well. Because this team, they're going to run a million plays. They're going to throw the ball over 40 times most games. And Sam Hartman also has a little bit of rushing upside as well. And I do not play Wake running backs ever, personally. They split the workload. And I mean, even with Kenneth Walker there, he was not Kenneth Walker until he left. So that tells you all you need to know. All right, looking at Vanderbilt, they squashed a couple cupcakes, notably dropping 63 points on Hawaii. So that's boosted their stats. I would assume people are going to own them more than they should this week because of that. Mike Wright, you're going to see the quarterback averaging 40-something fantasy points. 45 fantasy points in his only game log on DraftKings. I would assume that's going to draw some ownership interest here, even though it is Vanderbilt. But with an over-under at 65, if they are actually improved this year, can go back and forth and do have a dual threat quarterback, there is an interesting, you could have a game stack interest here. Do you have any interest at all in that here?
I do, actually. I never thought I'd say that I want to play a Vandy player in DFS. However, right at 5,400, it's a really good price. This game could get up and down. He's a really good runner. I think he had an 87-yard touchdown run week 1 against Hawaii, so he can certainly run, which gives you that upside. I probably don't want any Ramon Davis. Just not really interested. I don't mind Shepard at 55. Makes a good stack if you're going to go with Williams. It's a cheap stack. Not sure the ownership, as you said, it might be a little higher than it normally would be. However, I think for the price, it's worth a poke and a hope. Throw it in a GPP lineup and see what happens.
Yeah, definitely GPP only for me. Yep. Mike Wright, he is a UCF guy. He was a recruit as a UCF. So this guy is a pretty talented player in my opinion. And he can always break a 70-yard rush. Like I'm just remembering last year when there was the Wake Army game where Wake scored like 70 and Army scored 56. And it's like, how does Army score 56 points? They've been playing football since the history of football, and they never score 56 points. It's just the way Wake plays. They're prone to those kind of shootouts. That's the style they play to win games. And it was working, it worked last year. They're going to keep trying to play that style. I think Mike Wright would be the guy I'm most interested in. Will Shepherd, I'm glad you pointed him out. Jalen McGowan, the true freshman, he's starting immediately. He's like the fastest guy on the team. This kid's a track star, and he had a really big game last week, so I think he is also going to be involved. Rocco Griffin returns at running back, and he got some run in week 1, so I think that does hurt Ray Davis's outlook a little bit. And then Quincy Skinner, the wide receiver 3, missed last week. It sounds like he should be able to go again in this one, but no interest for me. All right, moving on. One of the games of the week. Bama versus Texas, probably going to be an absolute romping. There's not really many good games this week in week 2, to be totally honest with you. Going to be DFS interest in this one for sure. Bama is a 20-point favorite. Over-unders listed at 65.5. Bama, if you live under a rock, they have the Heisman-winning trophy quarterback Bryce Young. He went absolutely bonkers for 46 fantasy points in week 1 against Utah State. They won that game 55-0. At running back, Jahmyr Gibbs is the price king on the running backs as well. So you have the most expensive running back on the slate, most expensive quarterback. Wide receivers, Jermaine Burton is certainly priced up at 8.1K. Then you have Kobe Prentice, 6.9 starting in the slot, and Trayshawn Holden at 6.8K. Where are you looking at Bama here, Kevin?
Anywhere you want, you can play them all. So Bryce Young, 10.2, it's a high price. However, if he's going to run like he did last week, like last year, he didn't run. He just didn't run that much. Last week, he had 100 yards rushing. If he's going to do that, the sky's the limit. I mean, he's pretty much worth any price. So I think you certainly have to have some Bryce Young exposure. Gibbs, I think Gibbs has great upside. The price is a little high. I mean, if the problem is if Bryce Young counts for 5 touchdowns, Gibbs could be limited in that area. So I just don't know. So probably some exposure, not a ton. Wide receivers, again, I like them all. If I'm going to have exposure, though, it's probably going to be what's Bolden, 6.7 or 6.8. That's
6.8 Holden.
Yeah, 6.8. That's probably where my exposure is going to be. But again, you can play any of them. Burton, just a little too pricey for me this week.
Froze on me.
Oh, hear me?
You still there?
Yep.
Froze on me. So you're going Holden?
Yeah, if I'm playing a Bama receiver, and I don't mind stacking with any of them.
Yeah, I don't hate it at all. These guys are way too cheap on FanDuel, so if you're playing FanDuel, they're going to be the mush. Jahmyr Gibbs is 8,000 on FanDuel, which is ridiculous. I don't think you have to play Bryce Young at 10-2. I mean, they're in a shootout, so I don't hate it at all, but there's just some other great options. Like Hartman's 8K. Hendon Hooker's under 8K. And Jahmyr Gibbs is the price king on the slate. So I really don't think you have to play him, but Jahmyr Gibbs is a great running back, great receiving threat. He has that PPR upside. They didn't show it against Utah State because they were just whipping Utah State and they didn't have to. I will say in showdowns, if you're playing this slowdown, I like showdown. I like Jace McClellan. He's priced as the 3rd most expensive running back. He was actually the 2nd running back in the game, and I think this one could be a shootout. So I don't hate him at all because he's priced way down in the showdown. Wide receivers, I agree with you. It's Holden and Burton as the top 2 guys. I think they priced this one correctly, except Prentice should be a little cheaper because he's going to split a little bit of time in the slot. He's not going to play a full-time role, whereas Holden and Burton most likely are. All right. On the flip-flop, you have Texas. Quinn Ewers comes in as the 5-star quarterback, supposed to turn things around. They laid a beating on UL Monroe in the first game. I guess the question on this one is how much can they keep pace with Bama? So, Kevin, do you think they keep pace and you can do some run backs here with Texas?
Possibly early, but I think in the end, I think Bama wins by 20, 25. Ewers at his price, that could be a decent play. He's going to have to throw the ball a ton. Bijan, I don't really want to pay the price for him this week. That's, he's pretty much an auto play every week, but this week I really don't want to pay the price. Worthy's interesting because the kid's a stud. He's a burner. He's got huge upside, or he could get nothing because he could get blanketed. They do have a cheap option Sanders, the tight end, he's 3K. He had 6 for 85 and a touch last week. He may just get a bunch of check downs just because Alabama's coming after Ewers. So he's not a bad. I don't think he's an awful play for a minimum price.
Still with me?
Yep.
All right. I like the Sanders at 3K call. He actually led the team in targets last week, I believe. Let's pull it up.
Yep.
Okay, no, Worthy had 7 and Sanders had 6.
Okay.
But yeah, he was right there. Whittington had 4. Jordan Whittington going to be your third wide receiver, and Bijan had 5. So I really like that they're involving Bijan in the passing game this year too, because he's an excellent receiver. I think that could help him be viable in this matchup. I'm not really in love with it, certainly, but it's viable in stacks. I think your top price adjusted option is Sanders at 3K. And then, I mean, Worthy, this guy's one of the fastest receivers in college football at 6.7K. Like, he could catch a few deep ones. Overall, I'm just super concerned about their offensive line. I didn't think they looked good in week 1, and they were terrible last year. So I think they're going to get mauled up front. I think you're just going to be relying on a couple deep shots mostly. So I wouldn't really play any of these guys in cash. I think in tournament, Worthy or Sanders is where I would look. And you could probably look Sanders in cash as well. All right. Next up, we have Southern Miss versus Miami. Southern Miss. So Ty Keys, their quarterback, got injured last game. It's unclear if he's going to play in this one. It's an undisclosed injury. This offense is pretty bad in general. They were really bad a year ago. They played about 10 different quarterbacks, couldn't keep one healthy. Ty Keys was a freshman last year, supposed to be the guy this year and really improve that offense. But now he's hurt again, and they resorted to running the Wildcat with Frank Gore last week. Same thing they did to end last year, because Frank Gore, their running back, is pretty much their entire offense. Jason Brownlee, their wide receiver at 5.1K, is really the only wide receiver they look at all in this offense. Any interest at all in Southern Miss?
0. There's way too many better options to be worrying about Southern Miss, so I won't have any exposure this week.
I think I agree. Frank Gore is going to have one of the biggest workloads in college football. So anytime you see him at 6.2, that's interesting. But, I mean, they're going to be big underdogs in this one. So not sure that's for me. Too many good options. All right. Looking at Miami. Josh Gaddis takes over as offensive coordinator. Mario Cristobal in there as your coach. So your O-line's been your trouble. Now you have Cristobal. Should be able to coach that one up. The offensive line guy. He actually played offensive line there in his playing days. Any interest in Miami for you, Kevin?
Again, not a ton. Maybe a little Van Dyke, but it just I think there's just better options at similar price. So probably not. Running backs, looks like Rooster Knighton's coming back this week. So Henry Parrish, the Ole Miss transfer, probably won't go nuts like he did week 1. So that muddies that backfield, and I'm just not in love with any of their receivers. So probably staying away. Like I said, there's better options in other games.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think these guys are priced too cheap, but with Knightland being banged up, it's going to be a 3-way split between him, Parrish, and then Franklin's going to get it on the goal line. So not sure I'm going to go there. I actually think Southern Miss's defense is really good for Group of 5 standards. So I don't really know what that means against Miami, but I think they're going to hold their own at least a little bit. I thought they looked really good against Liberty last week. As far as wide receivers go, Xavier Restrepo led the team with 5 targets a week ago, while Will Mallory had 3. So they didn't really show anything offensively. They just beat a cupcake. I think Tyler Van Dyke, the quarterback's too cheap at 6.4K. Anytime I see a quarterback of his caliber at 6.4K, I think that's a little ridiculous because I think this kid has potential to go in the first round of the NFL draft. Was one of the only players in history to go for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in 6 straight games to end last season. So anytime you see a player like that at 6.4K, I'm not sure I'm going to have a ton of him, but the price is just way off. Yep. Other than that, I don't have a ton of interest. Mostly just Van Dyke. All right, moving on. We have the Ohio Bobcats playing the Penn State Nittany Lions. Total of this one's at 54. Penn State is a 25.5 point favorite. Supposed to be a beatdown. The Ohio guys are all priced way down. I took pretty much all their unders on Prize Picks and maxed out those. So that tells you what I'm thinking about Ohio in this matchup. I think they're going to get dominated up front. What are you thinking here, Kevin?
Yeah, same. Again, there's no reason to take any Bobcats this week. Penn State should drub them. So just no reason to go there.
Yep, cross them off. All right, looking on the Penn State side of the ball, pretty good win over Purdue. It looked like they're going to lose that game for most of it, but they pulled it out. You had a three-way split at the running back position. Nick Singleton played 12 snaps. Then Kayvon Lee and Katron Allen, I believe is his first name, that stud freshman they have back there. They each had 9 snaps. So they're really splitting the workload 3 ways. As far as wide receivers go, Mitchell Tinsley had 12 targets leading the team in the first game. Keandre Lambert-Smith had 8 targets. And then Parker Washington, surprisingly, was third with only 4 targets. And that was actually 4th on the team because the tight end Warren had 5 targets. Sean Clifford had a huge game in week 1. Actually, I've been defending Sean Clifford, I feel like. He was injured last year. He's not the greatest quarterback, but this kid can run a little bit. He's got 3 really good wide receivers. I just want to defend Sean Clifford. I'm not sure I'm playing this week, but I'm a Sean Clifford. I'm a fan. He's tough. Other than that, what are you thinking here, Kevin?
Yeah, probably not much exposure here. As you said, the running backs are going to split. The wide receivers, again, I think they spread it around. They'll probably score 40 points. However, I don't think anyone in particular has a great game. If you want to play Tinsley, his price is okay. Parker Washington, I don't know what to think there. I mean, going into the season, I thought he would be their number 1 or 1A at least, and he wasn't that in week 1 in a competitive game. So until I see a little more, I'm probably staying away from Penn State, just till I see what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, they're priced too cheap playing Ohio. Like, Ohio was not good last year. They averaged 22 points per game, and they went 3-9, and they play in the MAC. So, like, they were really bad. So they scored to like 40 points against Florida Atlantic last week, and now I guess people think they're a good team. I'm not really sure what's going on there, but I could make a case for all these guys. Tinsley had 12 targets a week ago, it's 5.7K, even though he went for 1,400 yards a year ago. Parker Washington's a stud, and he's 6.1K against a terrible team. And Nick Singleton might be the best freshman running back in all of college football, and he's 6K. So of course he could always have a big game, but overall, I think just one-offs here. If you want to do a one-off in your lineup, I wouldn't talk you out of any of them. All right, next up, we have Marshall playing against Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a 20.5-point favorite. That one's been moving up, probably going to hit 21 here if it hasn't already. Over-under set at 51. So that shows you what the odds makers are thinking about Marshall. Henry Colombi, the Texas Tech transfer and Utah State transfer, I believe. He's been everywhere, as has every player now in college football. You have guys making like 4 stops. He's their quarterback after Grant Wells transferred to Virginia Tech. Rasheen Ali, one of the best running backs in all of college football, is still out for an undisclosed reason, personal reasons. It sounds like Corey Gamage at 6'6" is your top receiver. Your running backs, you're left with Kalon Laybourne, formerly of Florida State, as your RB1, and then Ethan Payne also going in there at 3.6K. So I think in general, the running backs are priced cheaper than they should be. Against Notre Dame, I'm not really sure that matters because even Travion Henderson couldn't have a good game against Notre Dame last week. Are you thinking along the similar lines as me?
Yeah, I'll have no exposure to the Thundering Herd. Like you said, I don't see them doing anything against Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame smashes. I think Notre Dame comes out pissed off after last week, and I think they just destroy them.
So, who are you interested in Notre Dame if you think they destroy them?
I love the quarterback Buckner. Love him. 6K. He's a really good runner. I think he has a game where he has 4 total touchdowns, probably close to 300 total yards. I love him as a tournament play at 6K. 6K. I like him better than Hartman at 8K. I really on board with Buckner. The running backs, they split 3 ways, so you can make a case any of them could have a decent game. Probably won't have any exposure because they split so much. And then if you're playing Buckner, I don't mind stacking Mayer, the stud tight end. I think he's 3.9. So I don't mind that at all. And I also don't mind Buckner as a standalone play. So basically I'm all in on Buckner.
I am glad you made the case for Buckner because I was going to as well. And I just think it's a good spot. First off, I do think he's underrated in fantasy right now. 6K is ridiculous because Notre Dame runs the quarterback a lot more than people give him credit for. Tommy Rees likes to do that. And Buckner is undoubtedly the best rushing threat they've had. Like, Ian Book could run a little bit, but I mean, please. And like Buckner's, he's a rush first quarterback in my opinion. And we saw last week he wasn't ready throwing the ball. Last year as a true freshman, he had 336 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. on 7.6 yards per rush. So you're saying, oh, who cares? 7.6 yards per rush for a quarterback is damn impressive. When you consider that was as a true freshman for an 11-win Notre Dame team, a team that almost got to the playoffs as a true freshman, forcing his way onto the field. I think this kid's very, very talented on the ground. I think he has huge upside in tournaments. I don't hate that at all. My issue is, of course, they don't really have any wide receivers on the team in general. They're very injured. And for some reason, they just haven't given enough scholarships to wide receivers. Just completely incomprehensible for a program like Notre Dame. But here we are. The tight end, Mayer, is their wide receiver one. He had 8 targets in week 1. Didn't have a big week, but he's the go-to guy. Had a huge season last year. Going to have a huge season again at 3.9K. I actually think it's really hard to not play him in your lineups unless you think it's going to be a blowout. But I don't even think it's going to be like a huge blowout. I mean, I think Notre Dame's got some things they have to work on, and Marshall's among the top of the Sun Belt, which is a decent conference. So I think it could be the perfect fit here, where it's close enough that Notre Dame, doesn't rest their starters. It's actually a game where these guys are playing in the fourth quarter, and that would be fantasy goldmine. So I don't hate any of these players. As far as wide receivers, again, they don't really have any. I think their best receiver is going to be Lorenzo Styles this week at 5.7K. He did nothing in week 1 against Ohio State, but you can't blame him there. So he's too cheap, but not sure I'll get there. As far as running backs, they had a perfect split. They played Audric Estime 10 snaps, Chris Tyree 11 snaps, and Logan Diggs 9 snaps. So I don't think you can do anything here in the running back room, right, Kevin?
Yep, agreed. And especially because Buckner can steal those touchdowns too. So just no reason to go there.
Yeah. Tyree's a home run threat, and he's a good receiver, but they didn't play him at all. I was shocked they didn't play him, and I was shocked. All right. Moving on. Tennessee versus Pitt. This is going to be an interesting one. We have a couple ugly ones coming up here later on the slate, but this is not one of those. Tennessee, 6.5-point favorite. Seems a little wide. I don't have a lot of betting leans so far on this slate, but seems a little wide. I don't know. Over under 66.5, the highest over under on the slates. Some game notes.
Yep, you froze.
You got me?
Now I have you, yeah.
It's the first Volunteers out-of-conference road game since 2014 when they went to Norman, Oklahoma. So that shows you how the SEC schedules these out-of-conference games. I'm surprised they're even playing this one, but here we are. Last year, Pittsburgh won the game. I believe it was a very close game, very good game. I was watching on the phone in my car in Arkansas. Hooker only played part of the game last year because they were still doing the Joe Milton experiment. So much different this time around. What are you thinking here for Tennessee, Kevin?
Obviously, love Hooker, love the play. He's not crazy price. There's weeks where he'll be 9K, and this week he's 7.8. So love the play. Should be a shootout. Not sure I'm going to get to any Tennessee running backs, just not there. Small, I don't know. He doesn't excite me for that price. Wide receiver wise, obviously Tillman is certainly in play at 7.3. Guy was a stud last year. Didn't do much week 1, but they played Ball State, so he didn't need to do much week 1. I think a Hooker Tillman stack is, you can do a lot worse than that. Brew McCoy, I never thought I'd say that I would play Brew McCoy in anything because the guy's been a turd and, kind of flopped around. So price wise, he's there. I just don't know if I'll play him. Yeah. So, and Wyatt or Hyatt, I don't know. I think this is a Tillman game. I think he comes out and shows his stuff, and I think it's a Hooker to Tillman game. So that's probably where I'm going, especially in cash games. That's.
Yeah. You could make an argument Hendon Hooker is the QB1 in all of fantasy this week if you're ranking them, because the over under 66.5, and he's a dual threat, and he's priced at 7.8K. So he's priced 2.4 thousand below Bryce Young. It's a bit ridiculous. Doesn't mean he's guaranteed to score Bryce Young by any means, but it's just way too cheap. Josh Heupel system. They're going to run a million plays. He's going to run the ball. He's going to throw the ball deep. He's the perfect fantasy quarterback. He's not the perfect real life quarterback, but he's like 25 freaking years old running the ball and throwing it deep. It's like, it's too simple. So love it. I love Hooker. Don't have to play him, but love him. Cedric Tillman's too cheap at 7.3. This guy ended the year on an absolute heater. He's going to keep ending the year on a heater, I think. I'm not really sure what to think about how good Pitt's defense is. They gave up some points against West Virginia, but I think they were a little better. They were a little better than that showed. However, they were terrible against the run, which was surprising to me. So, like, they had C.J. Donaldson, a converted tight end, true freshman, went for 120 yards on 7 carries on the ground. And usually Pitt's really solid. But in general, yeah, Josh Heupel, he splits the workload between his running backs. That's what he's done consistently. I think he's going to continue to do that here. So I could actually see them running for a decent amount here. And I'm just going to kind of assume a lot of that goes Hooker's way. Wide receivers, I agree with everything you said. I think Tillman. I just think these wide receivers are underpriced. Like Tillman at 7.3, Perry at 6.9. And there's some other guys we'll talk about later. Like Tank Dell is 6K. You can fit like 3 or 4 absolute stud wide receivers, and I don't really see why or how you get away from that this week. All right, any interest on the Pitt side of the ball?
Not really. Keaton Slovis is terrible. I just can't. At his price, there's the guys that are priced lower that I'd much rather play than Keaton Slovis. The running backs, I think Hammond is banged up, and I'm not going to play. I don't even have to pronounce his name. Iwakonda, just not worth it for me. Mumfield, the transfer, I have really high hopes for him, and he was decent week 1, but for his price, I think he's way too high. It's just not something I want to be interested in. So I'm probably not playing any Pitt, guys. Probably fading Pitt. It's tough when it's a high scoring game, but I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think I'm all for fading Pitt as well. That's crazy to say. I mean, I wouldn't hate any one-offs against a Tennessee defense ever, but this just isn't the same Pitt offense. So if you missed what happened during the offseason, Mark Whipple, fresh off having, the offensive coordinator, having a great season, Jordan Addison winning the Biletnikoff, Kenny Pickett getting drafted in the first round of the NFL draft, like insane statistical numbers. Pat Narduzzi, the head coach, decided that was too much offense for him, too much throwing the ball. They needed to ground and pound the ball even more. So that's what they're going to do this year. The 300 yards in the opener against West Virginia, that looks great, but they also threw the ball only 24 times. Okay. And that was against the West Virginia team that lost its top 5 players in the secondary from a year ago, completely depleted. So I don't think the volume is going to be there for any of these guys. It is worth noting, I suppose, Mumfield led the team with 8 targets. A week ago, I would say Bub Means. A lot of people are going to look at him because he's really cheap. But he had a fumble, he had a drop, and he only played half the team's passing snaps. So I think he might be in the doghouse. All right. Moving on. Oh, yeah. Let me just quickly touch on the running backs. They're going to rotate these guys. Hammond had a huge week 1. I guess he could have a huge week 2 against Tennessee, but it seemed very, very, very fluky to me. He just happened to get the touchdowns. So that's all I'll say about him. All right, App State, fresh off scoring 61 points, I believe it was, 64 to 61.
Yeah, something like that.
Against North Carolina. Not expected to score 60 points against Texas A&M this week. Oh, boy. Over-under's only 54. Minus 19 in favor of Texas A&M. I assume you have no interest in App State, Kevin.
Yeah, I can't do it. I can't play Chase Bryce against A&M. The running backs split. They're both good backs, but they split. So yeah, I got nothing for. I'll have no Appy State this week.
Yeah, no reason to play him against the top 5 defense. I will just say, last week I mentioned, hey, if you're playing a game stack, this App State North Carolina is probably the way to go. I was just so dismissive about Chase Bryce, and then I was dismissive when you mentioned Josh Downs for Drake May. I said if he doesn't have Josh Downs, I wouldn't really be interested. And they both went bonkers. So yeah. I'm really mad at Chase Bryce. That came out of nowhere. 40-point fourth quarter. That's not happening here. That's all I got to say. Not happening. Pretty low over-under. App State does have a good group of 5 defense usually, but they gave up 64 points a week ago, like I said. So Texas A&M could possibly score some points here in this one. Haynes King, I talked about him last week. I don't know what to think about this guy. I think he could be underrated in fantasy because he runs a 4.4. He's very fast. Texas A&M did play at a little bit of tempo in week 1, but at 8.7K, that's a very, very, very high price. Anaya Smith had a good game at wide receiver, 7.2. He led the team with 9 targets, and then Evan Stewart, the true freshman, marked all the way down at 5.2K, also had 9 targets. So it seems like they have a clear number 1 and number 2. And then, of course, you have one of the fastest players in all of college football at running back in Devin Achane. What's your interest here, Kevin?
King is just a little too expensive for me, especially with the lower price quarterbacks. He's 900 more than Hendon Hooker. He's a little too expensive for me. I actually, my favorite play of this game is Devin Achane. He didn't do much week one. Actually, only averaged like 2.5 or 3 yards a carry. I think he kills it this week. I think this is that type of game where he has 18 carries, 150 yards, and 2 scores. So I'm all in on Achane. I don't really want to pay that price for Smith at wideout. I can see Evan Stewart, but mainly my interest is in Achane this week. I think he blows up.
I think Achane and Stewart. Listen, you hit it well. I the same interest for me. I don't think they're must plays or anything, but I think they're the clear top 2 options price wise. First off, they're 2 of the fastest players in college football. Like, I'm not exaggerating. And Achane's a clear RB1. It's not like last year where him and Spiller were splitting carries. This guy's clear RB1. He's playing a team that they're favored by 20 points against. So I think it's relatively simple. And like I said, there's so many good wide receivers on this slate that Stewart, he's a good play, but he's not a must play. I think Achane is definitely has to be in your running back pool. All right, next up, we have back-to-back games where the spread is 17.5 and there's a over-under below 50. So probably not much interest in the next 2 games. Washington State playing Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a 17.5 point favorite. Over-under is 49.5. I had very high hopes about Washington State before the season, but they were really bad against Idaho in week 1. They're going to throw the ball. Air raid system. Eric Morris comes over from Incarnate Word as the new offensive coordinator. Cameron Ward threw for over 4,700 yards and 40 touchdowns at the FCS level a year ago. Now he's here playing Wisconsin in Madison. That's a bit of a change from FCS. Are you biting the bullet on any of these guys? Because they're very cheap, Kevin.
I know they're so cheap. Cam Ward at 4.9 is just crazy. Like you said, he's going to toss it around. I just don't know what he's going to do at Madison against a really good Wisconsin D. He could throw it 48 times for 237 yards and 2 picks. It's I don't know. I'm probably not going to, just because of the other quarterbacks on the slate. I don't want anything to do with the running backs. I think Nakia Watson is just not good. If I was going receiver, I'd probably play Stribling. Ollie had a lot of targets last week, but they're hard to play against a Wisconsin team in what should be, they should bludgeon them. So I'm probably going to fade. It's tough, but I'm probably going to fade them.
Yeah, I'm going to fade him. Listen, Cam Ward, I was all over this guy in the offseason, but I mentioned he's a very raw prospect. Like, he runs around. He looked like a chicken with his head cut off, and I'm pretty sure I used that exact wording this offseason when talking about him. I mean, he has adjustments to make. This team was really bad in week 1. They played Idaho. They scored only 24 points and averaged 5.5 yards per play. Passing-wise, Cameron Ward was under 5 or somewhere in the mid-5s. I think it was 5.4 yards per attempt. It's Idaho. I'm sure he's going to improve. I'm still have high hopes for this offense. You don't want to make adjustments against one of the best defenses in the country in Madison. It's not going to happen. I'm not playing him. It's that simple. I'll talk about him later in the year, hopefully. Not right now. Wide receivers, I think you could play these guys as a one-off. I think Stribling is the number 1 guy. He had 10 targets a week ago. Ali had 8. Victor had 7. And Renard Bell had 6. So one thing worth noting there is Victor did not play a full-time role, because when they play 3 wide receiver sets, it's going to be Stribling, Ali, and Bell. But when they go to 4 wide receivers, he's going to be the second slot guy out there in addition to Bell. So overall, I wouldn't hate a one-off. I mean, Ali had a pretty good camp. He's 3.4K. And then Victor, had a bunch of targets last week. But I could see Stribling. There's another guy who's at 5K that I could see being in a ton of lineups who I also like. But Stribling, if his team's going to throw the ball 40 times and he's their number 1 guy, I mean, he could catch a touchdown and have like 8 receptions and totally be in the winning lineup. So I wouldn't hate it, but wide receivers for sure the only way I could look. All right, looking at Wisconsin, they have the terrible Graham Mertz returns for his millionth time. Wisconsin wide receivers, you're almost never playing them, but it is a favorable matchup. And then Braylon Allen, the man-child beast at 7K, is certainly one to talk about. So are you fitting Allen into your lineups? What do you think about his 7K price?
Yeah, absolutely. The Incredible Hulk at 7K, he's easy to fit. I think he's probably my number 1 running back on the board this slate. So yeah, he'll be in a lot of lineups. He's going to get 25, 26, 25, 28 carries, easily 202 upside. So he's pretty much a no-brainer. Lock and load there.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have a lot of Allen. I wish he had more pass catching upside, but it is what it is. I mean, they're 17.5 point favorites, and they're going to score the ball here. Their offense kind of stinks. Like, I'm worried about that. Like, it's not Iowa. It's definitely not Iowa, but it's not exactly all that far off. Like, they're pretty bad, but the reason they're not Iowa is because of Braylon Allen, and almost Braylon Allen alone, to be honest with you. So if Braylon Allen was on Iowa, I'd be playing him too in this spot against Washington State. It's too good of a spot. All right, next up, this one is ugly, folks. This is one of the uglier games I'm going to talk about all year for fantasy wise. I never want to make fun of Air Force. I love Air Force, but they're playing Colorado, and my God, Colorado football, get it together. This one is absolutely identical. 17.5 point spread in favor of the home team, Air Force. Over under is 49.5, same exact as the last one. Colorado, putrid, 18.8 points per game a year ago. Only 257 total yards of offense. Complete joke. I guess they looked better in the opener against TCU. They looked competent, at least in the first half defensively, and they did have 348 yards of total offense, which is 90 yards better than the average last year. Not sure who's going to start at quarterback. Both JT Strout and Brendan Lewis got snaps in the last one. I thought Strout was going to be the starter last year for what it's worth, and then he got hurt. He averaged 6.8 yards per attempt, but he looked like crap, in my opinion. Running back, that's going to be Deion Smith and Alex Fontenot splitting the workload, and those guys are really, really cheap. For a team that has Mike Sanford, the coach, offensive coordinator, who was at Minnesota, who ran the ball at a top 3 rush rate when he was there. But it's Colorado and they suck. So is the Sanford stuff and the cheap running backs enough to get you to bite the bullet at all on these backs?
No.
Yeah, I could see playing Fontenot, but not for me. Too many other good options. Like Myers, the same price. So why would you? Why? How about the Air Force side of the ball? They're on the triple option. Very difficult to read. Any interest on Brad Roberts or Zeke Daniels or any other options?
I actually like Zeke Daniels at 5.9. He's a really good runner. Obviously, he has, he could easily run for 2-3 scores and throw for a score or two. So I do like him at that price. I think he's going to be pretty low owned. He's playing, as you said, he's playing a terrible Colorado team. So I think you could do worse. Brad Roberts, he's a guy I always get wrong. So when I do play him, he gets 70 and a touch. When I don't play him, he gets 150 and 3. So I don't know. I don't know what to say there. I just get that guy wrong every time I play him. So certainly good upside against Colorado. And they have a receiver I actually like. What is his name? Cinnamon or
Kinnaman?
Yeah, Kinnaman at 4.1K. Obviously they run their wide outs. They give him rushing attempts. So at 4.1K, he had a touchdown catch and a touchdown run last week. It's worth a shot against Colorado. I mean, anyone can do anything against Colorado. So,
yeah, I like Air Force. I'm not sure I'm going to play him this week. I agree with you about Zeke Daniels. I think he was underrated this year. I actually got him really late in some season-long college fantasy football because I think the triple option, having the right quarterback running, the scheme makes all the difference. The difference. We saw what happened in Navy when they haven't had the right guy the last couple of years. Zeke Daniels is experienced, and he's damn good. He's been good every year he's been there. He even throws the ball deep a fair amount. They always rank number 1 in passing explosiveness, which is crazy because they don't have many attempts. But when they do, they connect, man. This guy's really good. So I don't know if I can get there quite in tournaments, but I do like him. Brad Roberts, I'm not going to play him. He has no receiving upside, and he only had 8 carries in the opener after he underwent a meniscus surgery over the summer that I've been downplaying because it's a meniscus. Who cares? But the coach Calhoun said he was going to lighten his workload, and he only had 8 carries in the opener after ranking 2nd behind only Lou Nichols in carries last season. So I'm not getting there. DeAndre Hughes at 4.7 is their starting tailback. The tailback's not usually that useful, but Hughes is a good player and was a receiver a year ago. So he could be a deep threat as well. And then, yeah, Kinnaman, I had this guy circled in the offseason because I think his name was Mike Davis, whoever they had, the guy who was like, this guy had like 20 catches for like 700 yards last year. It was insane. He averaged like 34 yards per reception because that's what Air Force does. They get you to cheat up on the line of scrimmage and they hit their wide receivers deep. And Kinnaman's playing that role this year. So it's definitely not sustainable, getting a 70-yard touchdown more than every other touch. But I mean, that's the offense. That's what they're going to try to do. So I think you could do worse in tournaments, but total dart throw. All right, next up, another ugly one. A good game, but an ugly one. Iowa State versus Iowa. Iowa's favored by 3.5. Over under is 40.5. So that tells you about all you need to know for DFS. Any interest at all in Iowa State here?
I don't have any interest in either team. I won't play anybody in this game. Iowa can't even score an offensive touchdown. So I'll have nobody from this game.
I think I agree with you. I just want to say last year I bet on Iowa State in this matchup and I felt cheated out of my money because they lost 27-17, but they totally outplayed Iowa. They had 21 first downs compared to 11 for Iowa. They had 339 total yards compared to 173 for Iowa. So they doubled them up on total yards. They just lost 4 turnovers. Brock Purdy had a terrible game. So if Duckers can tighten that up, I think they win this one because Iowa only managed 7 points against South Dakota State, which I assume you weren't watching that game, Kevin, because why would anyone? But there's 2 guys on South Dakota State with the last name Yankee, except they spell it Janke. So I root for them every week, and I had to bet on them, the Fighting Yankees against Iowa, and they came through. So F you, Iowa. You're boring. I'm not playing Xavier Hutchinson. He's going against Riley Moss, one of the best corners in college football, and he had just 3 catches for 22 yards last year against Iowa. And then running back sounds like Gavin Williams for Iowa on the Iowa side. I mean, Spencer Petras is a joke. This whole team's a joke. They have 2 wide receivers, scholarship wide receivers, healthy for this matchup, Kevin. 2. Yeah. So Gavin Williams is going to be back as the starting running back, but he's going to split time with LaShawn Williams as they ease him back. So, I mean, it's a good program. They win games, but it's a joke offensively. What are we doing? All right. Houston versus Texas Tech. Totally different ball game here. This should be a good one. Houston is +3. It was +3.5 earlier. I would get on that. I would be on Houston on the money line. I like them here personally. Over-under's at 63.5. I think that's too low. It's been moving up. It's going to keep moving up. I don't see why it's not like 68, 70. I think the books haven't quite adjusted for the Zach Kitley scheme in Texas Tech. But let's start at Houston here, Kevin. You have some really cheap options. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, the pricing is so bad on Houston that you almost think it's a trap because it's ridiculous. Tune is way too cheap. This game, I think this game's going to be a lot of people will have a ton of exposure here. This game, as you said, could be in the 70s. So Tune is just way too cheap. I really want nothing to do with their running backs, but Tank Dell at 6K is a joke. So he's going to be highly, highly owned. He's probably going to be 40% owned in GPPs. That said, it's really hard not to play him at 6K. And obviously the Tune to Dell stack is huge. So I'll have a bunch just like everyone else will.
I mean, you should never really play 100% of someone, but that's not totally true. Like if you're playing 3 lineups, you could play all 3 of Dell. If you're playing 150, I mean, I don't know, it's got to be in at least 100 of them. It's just a total mispricing. It's not something that would happen in the NFL, right? It's a perfect game script. They did disappoint me last week. I played a lot of Houston against UTSA, and I think we both did. And we got lucky.
Yep.
Because they played like crap. Dana Holgorsen, I can't stop making fun of Dana Holgorsen. I know he won the game. He beat a good UTSA team. I don't like Dana Holgorsen at all. I don't like him. I don't like him as a person. I don't like looking at him. I don't like that he tanked in college football. I don't like his offensive game plan. He should be better than he is. Oh, Dana Holgorsen tried to cut me off. Not going to happen so fast, buddy. I don't like him as a team, but they have some fantasy options. Dell led the team in targets with 6. Matthew Golden, the star freshman wide receiver, he's starting. He had 5. Joseph Manjack had 3. I could see Joseph Manjack being decently owned here. I do want to point out he only played 20 snaps. He did not see a full workload. Only Golden and Dell were on the field for over 40 snaps in the wide receiver room. So I did want to point that out. I think Brandon Campbell at running back is going to take over the lead job sooner rather than later. He's a USC transfer. He actually saw 18 snaps compared to only 8 for Tejon Henry and 7 for Stacey Sneed. But overall, that tells you it's a running back by committee. So not terribly interested for me. And Houston hasn't figured out how to run block. They keep running the ball on 2nd and long. Dana Holgerson's pissing me off, and they can't run the ball. They couldn't run the ball last year, but they're still going to score a lot of points. Clayton Tune's going to march them down the field, and the running backs could get some touchdowns and some receptions for a team that's probably going to score 30-plus points. All right, looking at Texas Tech. Starting quarterback, Tyler Shuck is injured yet again. He's always injured. So in steps Donovan Smith. You have a Zach Kitley quarterback at 7.7K, then a bunch of wide receivers. Taj Brooks, for some reason, is priced way up after having a big game against a cupcake, but probably not going to run the ball a whole time. What are you thinking here for the Texas Tech passing attack, Kevin?
Yeah, obviously Smith at that price, great play in that system. The beauty with him is he can actually run the football. So he'll be highly owned and probably worth it. That's why there's just this week, I don't know that you pay up for Bryce Young at that price when you can get guys like this much cheaper. So yeah, I'll definitely have some Donovan Smith. Receiver wise, so it's interesting, right? Miles Price had an absolute pooper last week. 3 catches, 39 yards. Now he did run the most routes. He just didn't catch anything. So I was kind of baffled with his performance last week. He's priced really high. So I think because of his bad outing last week and his high price, he's going to go low. He's going to be lower owned than he should be. So I think it's a bit of a contrarian play. I love Bradley at 5K. I think he's going to be really highly owned. The kid really looked good last week. So that's probably my interest. What's the kid at 6K? He's had a good week too, but I think he's their third option. So I'm probably number one is Bradley. And then if you want to get a little contrarian at the price, I don't mind playing Price at 7K.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, so I won't rehash it too much. Some background on Texas Tech, in case you don't know. Zach Kitley, the offensive coordinator, is coming in from Western Kentucky, where he rewrote the record books last year with Bailey Zappi and Jareth Stearns. It was Jareth Stearns who was a slot position player. So we're expecting them to throw the ball a ton, throw the ball all over the yard, be great for fantasy purposes, run at a very high tempo. I think extremely highly of Zach Kitley. He's one of my favorite offensive coordinators, as he should be for most people playing CFF. Miles Price, this team loses a lot of their receiving talent from a year ago. Miles Price, it looks like the most talented guy. Kitley said they're going to feed him targets this year. He's playing in the slot just like Jareth Stearns played in the slot a year ago. It seems tailor-made for Miles Price. He had a dud in week 1, but he was on the field more than any other wide receiver, only saw 4 targets. I think he is a good tournament play. Like I said, there's other lower price guys, but I could be it could be worth it. I think Bradley, I'm kind of mad he had such a big week 1 because I was the first person I heard all year on Jared Bradley. I wrote about him all the way back in March. This is a kid they like since he stepped on campus as a true freshman a year ago. He's a very explosive player. I think he is their number 2 option. You put it perfectly. I think he's going to be extremely high owned. So now I'm mad at him for having a good game in week 1. But I do like Bradley. He's not quite a must play, but he's close to it. I think he's a little bit more boom or bust as the outside guy. Miles Price is 6,000 on FanDuel, by the way. So if you're playing FanDuel and aren't playing Miles Price, I really have to question your process. I'm not even sure he's going to be super, super high owned based on the crappy game he had in week 1.
Exactly.
So I like it. I like everything about this game. Game stack. Absolutely. I think this is my number 1 game stack. I wish there were better running backs to play, but so it's not a full game stack, but you could get crazy and play Brandon Campbell, I guess. All right, last game. We have Virginia against Illinois. I have this written down as Virginia plus 4.5. Is Illinois really favored?
I think they are, which surprises me a bit.
Didn't Virginia run them out last year?
Yes.
I think.
Yeah, they did.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Interesting here. All right. 4.5 in favor of Illinois. Over under, probably the highest you're going to see all season, I would think, for an Illinois game at 47.5. I'll probably take the under. So that tells you what I'm thinking about this game. But Virginia offense, they went wild in this game last year, and they had a very good week 1. So I'd assume we'd have to be interested in Virginia. So tell me who to look at for Virginia here, Kevin.
Well, I'm a huge Armstrong guy. Had him last year. The guy was a stud. I think I was a little more bullish in the offseason than many of the pundits because they were all worried about the Clemson coach coming in and they were going to run the football and Brennan Armstrong isn't going to do anything. Listen, the running backs are terrible. Brennan Armstrong can run really well, and they have really, really good receivers. So at 6.3K, I'm going to have a lot of Brennan Armstrong this week. The price is just really too good. Even though it's a low, not a high total over under, I still think they're going to score 28 points. So I'm definitely in on Brandon Armstrong. Receiver wise, so the guy I actually like the best is Davis at 3.5, right? So he led him in catches, led him in yardage, scored a touchdown last week. I think he's like 6'7". He's just a big dude, and he's pretty fast. So 3.5K is it's a joke, right? He's going to be in most of my lineups, and that's a really cheap stack that allows you to pay up everywhere else.
Yeah, I don't hate it at all. I don't hate it at all. I don't mind them. I'm not sure I'm going to play them like as much as I thought at first, but I'm for sure going to own these guys. For sure. Yeah, I agree. Everyone thinks they're going to run the ball a ton because the coaches said they want to run the ball. They may want to run the ball, but they're not going to be able to run the ball. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball against Illinois. Illinois is a big physical team. That's what they pride themselves in. I think they're going to teach them a lesson in big boy football here. That's not to say they're not going to throw the ball. I do think they'll throw the ball well, but I could see Virginia, like the passing attempts are going to go down for Brennan Armstrong. So basically that's what made him such a great option in fantasy last year. One of the reasons is that the volume was there. Robert and the offensive coordinator, was brilliant, running a lot of fast tempo, throwing the heck out of the ball. And their defense was terrible. So it was perfect for DFS. I loved Brennan Armstrong. This year, Anai went to Syracuse. So the offensive coordinator is new, Des Kitchens. He's more old school. And like I said, they said they want to run the ball. My issue with that, again, you lose your entire offensive line. Your running backs, nothing really to speak of. You return everything in the passing game. You return your star quarterback, who had a brilliant season. You return your top 4 wide receivers. You have Lavelle Davis at 3.5K, a 6'7" kid who showed us as a true freshman, then was injured a year ago, now returns back from injury. I think it's all set up for them to have a pretty good passing year. Yet again, Brennan Armstrong didn't run a whole lot last year. He ran a lot less than I thought he would, but he had 100 yards and a touchdown in the opener. So that's encouraging to see from him. I think in general, I like him. I think Dontavian Wicks at 6.3. Again, a lot of good receivers on the slate, but he's one of them. He had 12 targets in the opener. Everyone's projecting him to take a huge step back. I don't know. Great player, 12 targets. You can work with that. Other than that, him and Davis were the 2 full-time players. So I think that was a really encouraging sign for Davis. They were on the field for pretty much every pass snap. Caton Thompson had only 25 snaps and 6 targets, whereas Billy Kemp had 21 snaps and 3 targets on 21 targets. So it sounds like those 2 are splitting the slot role. So that makes me a lot less interested in Thompson and Kemp. And I think you are correct in identifying Wicks and Davis as the top 2 guys. Illinois. Where should I look at for Illinois, Kevin? Let me have it.
I think it pretty much starts and ends with Chase Brown. I hear that, I heard in the offseason Illinois is going to run more up tempo, and it's still Brett Bielema coach team. They're going to run the shit out of the ball. Give me Chase Brown. He's been a beast the first 2 games. Should have 25 carries, and Virginia's defense still isn't very good. So at 6.4, he's a really good play. There's a lot of good running backs. You can play him as your flex. So you run 3 backs out there, however you want to do it. But pretty much Illinois starts and ends for me with Chase Brown. Isaiah Williams is just too expensive at wide receiver for what he does. So Chase Brown's it for me. Yeah,
if you're playing cash, you're playing Chase Brown. I think it's about that simple. Tournaments, I still think I'm playing Chase Brown. He might have the biggest workload on the slate. Josh McCray, they have a fantastic running back too. He's out.
Yep.
So I think they have like a freshman as their RB2 on the depth chart, or they have Chase Hayden, who's been at like 6 different schools. They're going to feed this guy carries. I think he had 39 carries a week ago.
Yeah, he got a ton.
Ridiculous. And Virginia's defense has been bad for a while. I know, like I said, I know the coaching staff, there's coach speak. They're trying to fix it. They got John Rudzinski, the former Air Force defensive coordinator. Usually don't see those guys leaving the military academies, but he left to go there. But you're not going to fix this overnight, fellas. They allowed 466 total yards last year, 6.6 yards per play. This defense stank. Then in the opener against Richmond, how did the rush defense look? They allowed 170 yards and a touchdown on the ground on 35 carries, after allowing 255 yards per game on the ground. So, again, I think they're showing you guys want to play big boy football, and you're telling the media you want to play big boy football. This is how you do it. Brett Bielema, baby. I think that's going to happen in this one. I'm not saying it's going to win them the game or anything, but they're going to beat them up physically. And then I think Armstrong's going to have to throw the ball. All right. That wraps up the slate. We didn't do too bad. Hour and 5 minutes.
Not bad.
Any final thoughts, Kevin? Looking over, I know we mentioned there's some really cheap quarterbacks.
Yep.
The running backs, the pricing I think is a lot better on running backs, and then the wide receiver pricing is pretty bad, to be honest with you. So you can make a really stacked lineup. I think it's going to take a huge score to win this week.
Yeah, I agree. The scoring is going to be really, really high this week. So, it just depends on how you want to go. Me personally, I'm going to go lower price quarterbacks. I'm probably actually going to pay up. I really like Braylon Allen, Deuce Vaughn, Chase Brown, and then you can still get stud receivers with them. So I'm probably paying down at quarterback this week for me.
Yeah, sorry, I was just counting. I think Braylon Allen's the 7th highest priced running back, which is insane.
Crazy.
A chain is priced below Taj Brooks. So yeah, I apologize for calling the running back pricing good. It's not good. You can easily fit 2 stud running backs. The quarterbacks, I don't know if you want to call them a stud, but there's some really good options in the 6K range. So you could either go 6K range, or you can easily fit Hooker or Hartman in there. I think if you're quote unquote paying up, you're going there, or Donovan Smith. These 3 guys right in a row here look awesome. So either go 2 cheap quarterbacks or cheap quarterback and that guy. And wide receiver, you can do whatever the heck you want, especially with Mayer at 3.9K, Jaron Bradley at 5K.
Davis at 3.5.
Yeah, Davis at 3.5. You can kind of do whatever you want on this slate. So on one hand, I'm really liking it because you can build a really stacked lineup. On the other hand, that does make me a little nervous because I know there's going to be a lineup that's going to be absolutely crushing this week. I hope it's I know my lineup's going to crush it this week, Kevin, which makes me confident. So maybe it's a cash week. Maybe I just go all out and play some cash. No, I crush it. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'll think about it. I'll sleep on it. All right, Kevin. Good stuff this week. Where can the people find you on Twitter?
At DFS Guru. Actually, I'll put it up for next week. And let's get it this week. And somebody we know needs to take down his 50K. It's crazy.
Yeah, it'll happen. I've been having pretty good success over the first couple of weeks, but we'll see if we can hit one of these big tourneys. Hopefully success keeps rolling. I just want to say thank you to everybody who's been listening. Year 3 doing the show. Thank you guys. You guys are crushing it. Reach out to me on Twitter if you feel like it. I try to be pretty I try to be pretty back and forth, but I am a busy man. So if I don't get to you immediately, I will get to you. Other than that, Daily Red Media, follow the account. As far as my work this year, you can find CFF stuff on Devi Watch. And then I'm also doing props for fantasy points. I have 2 ventures I'm very excited to be joining this year. But thanks for watching the show. Crush it this week and good luck.